Thank you for joining us on KREM 2 Plus. I'm Tim Pham. This is your KREM 2 News Recap, where we take a closer look at some of the biggest stories in the Inland Northwest this past week.
Well, this is the 25-page lawsuit that I've read through today, and it claims forcing people off of the homeless camp near I-90 is unconstitutional, and arresting those who refuse to leave violates their rights. One of the attorneys listed in this complaint told me this afternoon the goal with this lawsuit is to remove the threat of arrests.
So to be clear, no one wants Camp Hope to be permanent.
Andrew Biviano is one of the attorneys who brought the federal lawsuit forward.
The goal is simply to have the time and the resources needed to move people in a way that's better for them and the community, rather than much, much worse.
He hopes it will remind everyone working to clean up the camp that people staying there have constitutional rights.
Government's not allowed under the Constitution to just arrest people who have committed no crime, who have permission from the landowner to be where they are and are working their hardest to get themselves a better spot.
The lawsuit lists the city and Spokane County as defendants, along with Spokane Police Chief Craig Meidel and Spokane County Sheriff Ozzie Knezevich. Both have said they want to avoid using law enforcement to clear out the camp. But as a last resort, people who refuse to leave will be arrested. Biviano says the threat of arrests has already caused significant harm to the people staying at the camp. And according to the lawsuit, forcing them to leave would violate the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Rather than waiting for more harm to be done, this lawsuit was intended to stop that in advance and to give people some certainty that they will be able to follow through on the plan to get better housing.
He says this legal action doesn't distract from work already underway at the camp. But city spokesperson Brian Coddington says it does.
It does take away a little bit from the work that we're trying to do, and it creates another distraction and another layer of complexity that we have to work through. But nobody's deterred. We're going to continue to work together and do the best that we can.
In a statement from Sheriff Knezevich, he says the lawsuit provides false hope, and it encourages people to stay at the camp while hindering efforts to connect them with services. I shared these responses with the attorney. He says the goal of the lawsuit still is to remove arrests as an option to clearing out the camp. Now, this is just one lawsuit surrounding the cleanup efforts at this homeless camp. Spokane County also filed a lawsuit against WashDOT. It calls the camp a nuisance property and highlights the spike in crime and the harm to families and businesses over the last 10 months.
Well, local leaders are moving forward with plans to remove people and tents by November 15th. That's just 13 days from now. They believe outreach work can be done just as effectively indoors at the Trent shelter. The governor, on the other hand, is worried that pushing people out too early could result in Camp Hope 2.
We know this is a crisis in the state of Washington. We know we have a long ways to go. But I am pleased to say we are making solid progress on this effort.
Touring a homeless shelter in western Washington today, Governor Jay Inslee was asked about Camp Hope.
The state's position is we want to close and folks move to better housing away from Camp Hope as soon as possible.
People have been camping on the WashDOT property for 10 months. With millions of dollars earmarked to help the homeless, Inslee says there has been, quote, significant progress.
The number of people there, I think, has come down from about 600 to 400 or in that range. We are very aggressively looking for other housing solutions for them.
Local leaders say that work isn't happening quickly enough. Spokane County has filed a lawsuit against the Department of Transportation, and local leaders plan to clear people out by November 15th. The city of Spokane says outreach work will continue at the Trent shelter, which the mayor says is a safer, more humane alternative to sleeping outside.
That Trent shelter, no matter who runs it, it's going to be full.
The city is now working with the Salvation Army to create more space at the Trent shelter, and Catholic Charities could open the former Quality Inn as soon as December 1st. However, Governor Inslee worries that putting speed ahead of placement could have even worse consequences.
Now, some people in the community don't want to see them just pushed to another park in Spokane. They want them to have some other housing situation, so this just doesn't create a Camp Hope 2. And that's what we're doing, very dedicated to that as quickly as humanly possible.
And according to our sister station, King 5, the most recent numbers put the state's homeless population at 83,000 people. Nearly half of them live in King County.
Today is the Salvation Army's first official day as the operator of the Trent and Cannon Street homeless shelters. But the Guardians Foundation was the operator of both shelters until last week. So how did we get here? Let's break it down. The Guardians Foundation took over the Cannon Street homeless shelter from Jules Helping Hands in August 2020. About a year later, the city partnered with the Guardians to operate that facility as a year-round homeless shelter. Then, this summer, Spokane City Council named the Guardians as the operator for the new Trent homeless shelter. That $6.5 million contract was good through December 31st. The shelter officially opened the second week of September.
Way bigger than I thought it would be. It's very clean.
A month later, we learned an employee of the Guardians Foundation had allegedly mishandled funds. This prompted a criminal investigation. CEO Mike Shaw later confirmed with us about $118,000 went missing.
I knew that what I had was there for my time in choosing.
By October 26th, the city ended its contract with the Guardians and announced the Salvation Army agreed to take over.
It is our intention to take over the track and cannon contracts as is the way they are right now.
Now, the city never outright said if this decision was directly related to the fraud investigation, but the city administrator said several irregularities were found in payroll and expense reports submitted by the Guardians. According to the city, there won't be any interruption of services at the Trent or Cannon shelters. I did ask if we could see this transition firsthand today, but city spokesperson Brian Coddington told me we'll get that opportunity to go inside the shelter and see the new operation at the end of this week or early next week.
Winter is coming, and in the inland Northwest, with winter comes snow and other conditions.
Each year our winter weather is a little bit different, but if there's one thing you can count on, it's snow, ice, and cold temperatures.
And during the season of snow and ice, crews break down snow with necessary materials and clear streets, in what drivers hope is a timely process.
Street conditions during the winter are the source of a lot of conversation, so that's why we're always trying to evolve our system to have better response.
That's where Charlie Hanshaw comes in.
Here we go.
Hanshaw says he's been plowing Spokane streets for 13 winters.
2008, we had really bad snow my first week. I did almost 40 days straight, 12-hour days. So I got kind of just thrown to the wolves, and I had to learn really quick on how to do it.
So today, driving through cones in a parking lot demo isn't as challenging as tackling snow-covered roads. So this is light work for you now.
Yeah.
But even with over a decade of experience, he says there are still some neighborhoods in Spokane that are still a challenge to navigate.
South Hill or Browns Addition?
And clear.
Browns Addition is probably the worst in town. There's so many cars, everything's really tight, and there's nowhere to put the snow.
And while the city can't lessen the amount of parked cars on streets, with more snow gates and new equipment, the city hopes drivers will spend less time behind the wheel, and that this year's response will be faster and smoother for city crews and drivers.
Rumors are swirling. ESPN reporting yesterday that Gonzaga is in talks with the Big 12 about potentially joining the conference. Pete Thamel reporting that Gonzaga Athletic Director Chris Standiford met with Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark in the Dallas area while the Zags were in Frisco for their exhibition game against Tennessee last Friday. There have been rumors that Gonzaga has had conversations with the Pac-12 and Big East about potentially exiting the West Coast Conference to join a power conference. This comes after Yormark has publicly stated the Big 12 is, quote, open for business with realignment shaking up the landscape of college athletics. The Zags took on Warner Pacific last night in a final exhibition game, so we were able to ask Mark Few about the reports. Here's his response.
Ever since all this stuff has been happening, you know, coaches talk and ADs talk and commissioners talk and president, you know, everybody does. It'd be kind of probably not doing your job if you're not talking. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, like I've always said, we're going to do what's best for Gonzaga. So we just have to analyze everything, and you got to, and where we've been and what we've done so far has been great. So, you know, we just, you know, let all the chatter happen, and we'll do what we got to do.
Well, there you have it. The college landscape as we know it, ever shifting these days. Now, nothing is final. This is all just talk at this point, but could Gonzaga be in a new conference in the near future? It sure seems likely.
In October of last year, several Spokane firefighters who refused to get vaccinated were pulled from local fire stations. Some retired, others left altogether, and a handful were reassigned to non-medical positions. The mandate left several unfilled positions in the department. In order to cover them, the city had to pay out overtime, an estimated $3.7 million this year alone. Yesterday, several of those reassigned firefighters returned to the front lines as the state's COVID vaccine mandate for healthcare employees, firefighters, paramedics, and state employees ended on October 31st. Fire Chief Brian Schaefer says that will help reduce overtime costs, and so will hiring even more firefighters. 17 came on board this June, and another 21 will join the Spokane Fire Department once they graduate the Fire Academy this December. When asked about non-vaccinated firefighters returning, Schaefer told KREM 2 in part, each of these firefighters has remained in good standing throughout the mandate, and the community is fortunate to have them back serving people in need. We are excited to have these members back and on the apparatus.
Yasser Daraji is facing second-degree murder and harassment charges. Today, the state shared its opening statements and began calling their witnesses to the stand. So far, witnesses have testified to what their final days looked like with the victim before her death. Back in January of 2020, Daraji allegedly strangled his ex-wife, placed her body into a car on the South Hill, and set her on fire. The state claims Daraji's DNA was found on the steering wheel cover and window lock of her car.
The samples that were collected off the steering wheel cover and the window switch were consistent with having been contributed by Ibtihal Daraji as well as Yasser Daraji.
Up to this point, Daraji has claimed he is innocent, but in this trial, the state is going to try to disprove this claim.
And the medical examiner is going to be able to tell you Ibtihal Daraji's cause of death. That the medical examiner looked at photos and could see broken bones in the throat. The hyoid bone had been broken in 2 places. The medical examiner will tell you that's an injury consistent with having been strangled.
After its opening statements, the state moved into calling its first witness. She claims to have been one of the victim's best friends, and they would see each other almost daily.
What was your relationship with her like?
شلون كانت علاقتك بها؟ أختي. My sister.
On the day of the alleged murder, the two planned to meet, but the victim never showed. When she wouldn't respond to her text messages the next day, she began to worry. To protect the privacy of the witness, we will not be showing her face.
I wrote to her, Ibtihal, I'm worried about you.
شنو السالفة بيكي؟
What is the issue? Is there anything wrong with you?
يا معودة ليش هيجي تخلين بالي؟
Why are you keeping me so concerned like that?
Prior to the alleged murder, Daraji and his ex-wife were having troubles in their relationship. In 2016, Daraji's ex-wife filed a declaration with Spokane County Daraji was abusive towards her. 2 years later, she reported to being kidnapped at gunpoint by Daraji's family in Iraq. In opening statements, the state attorney shared Daraji and his ex-wife continued to have problems in late 2019. Spokane police would later find her disfigured body in her car January 2020. It's important to note the court did not hear opening statements from the defense today. The defense chose to reserve their opening statements for when they began making their case. The judge says testimony is set to last over the next several weeks. Over the course of this trial, the court is set to hear from Daraji's friends, the victim's friends, Daraji himself, and other key witnesses.
Spokane police continue to investigate a homicide in the Peaceful Valley area where a man's body was found bound and gagged. The city has seen 13 homicides this year, according to the latest data from SPD, an 8% increase compared to this time last year. Property crime is up nearly 24% across the city.
I support more police officers. I will tell you that something that the chief talks about all the time, and the 2 biggest challenges right now within the department are recruitment and retention.
Mayor Nadine Woodward and Chief Craig Meidel holding a telephone town hall tonight as the mayor gets ready to share her proposed $1.2 billion budget for 2023 with city council members.
The budget that invests in people in our neighborhoods, people who need shelter, and people who deliver the services that are critical to our community.
Woodward has said she would like to hire anywhere from 70 to 100 additional police officers in the near future, but that's not something that can happen at the snap of a finger.
So even if we had all the money in the world to hire 100 plus more officers, we wouldn't be able to do that overnight.
Chief Meidel says right now there's typically 115 officers assigned to patrol. They'll assign an additional 40 officers this January.
We're also going to be going to a little bit of a different sector. We're breaking up how we divvy up our patrol sectors, so the officers will have a smaller area to patrol. Our hope is that will reduce the commute time in between calls as well. And so we anticipate the community should see a difference in January because we are moving more of those patrol officers back into the field.
They are the latest set of traffic cameras to be installed in Spokane. 3 new school zone speed cameras just went up outside of schools on the South Hill. That brings the total number of speed cameras to 8 citywide, along with 15 red light cameras at 10 different intersections. The city leases the cameras from a third-party vendor, Arizona-based Vero Mobility, who also processes the violations that are sent to drivers. And KREM 2 viewer Sam asks, do you have to pay traffic light picture tickets that are billed from an out-of-state address? Our sources to verify this question are Washington State Law, the Spokane Police Department, and attorney Dean Chuang. To be clear, the cameras are perfectly legal under Washington law. RCW 4663-170 allows for the use of safety cameras in several areas, including at stoplights and in school zones. But since they're processed by a third-party out-of-state vendor, are you required to pay the ticket?
Yes, they are.
That's attorney Dean Chuang. In 2011, he successfully argued that tickets generated by red light and speed cameras were not valid because at the time, they were not first signed by an officer in Spokane before they were mailed to the driver.
So when you issue an infraction, you have to sign it under penalty of perjury, and that location of the signing actually has to be the actual place you were at. They were signing it out of Tucson, I believe, but the officer initiating the signature was actually in Spokane, so that was deemed invalid by Superior Court.
But following that ruling, SPD changed its process. Now each ticket is reviewed and signed electronically by an officer in Spokane before they're mailed out. Sergeant Teresa Fuller, who runs SPD's traffic division, says the courts have also since come to recognize electronic signatures as a valid way to sign tickets.
It's the same as a ticket I would hand you in person now. I don't even sign those. It's all electronic, and the court recognizes that as a feasible option for us.
Sergeant Fuller says no tax dollars are used for the cameras, and she adds they're an effective way for the city to reduce crashes and slow drivers down in school zones. She explains how the tickets are processed.
They do 95% of our work for us. They do the front end of the tickets, they handle all the data, they run the license plates for us, they make sure it's a good violation and that you're not being waved through by a police officer, or it's not one of us with our emergency lights on. They vet all of that, so by the time it lands on my officer's desk, he issues about 95% of the incidents that they send him.
She says think of the tickets like a parking violation. They don't go on your driving or employment record. So finally, what happens if you don't pay them?
And then if you don't pay that, they're going to treat it as a parking violation. And in the end, if it gets recorded to the Department of Licensing, you can't renew your registration.
So we can verify that even though red light and speed zone tickets are processed by a third-party out-of-state vendor, yes, you still have to pay them.
As you can see behind me, drivers are making quick use of the newly opened Sullivan Road here in Spokane Valley. For Spokane Valley leaders, Spokane County officials, and nearby homeowners, seeing this road open has been a long time coming. People in Spokane Valley have places to be. They could be passing through, or they could be staying a while. And if they choose to stick around, they might see just how much our area is constantly changing.
We always are rebuilding and rehabbing and maintaining our corridor to the best of our ability.
Even those who have lived here for a long time, like Rondi and Alan Alexander,
almost 50 years,
can still find things to get excited about.
So we just wanted to come over and celebrate the opening of the new road.
The Alexanders have had a front row seat to Phase 6 of the Bigelow Gulch Forker Road project.
Hearing all of the thump, which was great. We knew that had to be done to get the road open.
Starting today, the Alexanders won't be hearing jackhammers anymore. Instead, they'll be back to listening to cars and trucks drive on Sullivan Road, one of Spokane Valley's most important connectors.
People are pretty excited. They've been waiting with bated breath for this.
Sullivan connects with Bigelow Gulch and Forker Road as a part of the larger $11 million Urban Connector project. Project leads and community officials say this project supports the overall growth of the Inland Northwest.
Change is inevitable and growth occurs.
Drivers and freight trucks can drive from Northeast Spokane to East Spokane Valley safely and with ease.
Businesses will get goods faster. People will be able to shop faster too.
Whatever drivers use the road for, the idea is that now you can do it faster.
We do have business up there once in a while, so this will be very nice.
And with places to be, drivers are ready to get back on the road.
Do you use this road often?
We will.
Opening Sullivan Road is a major milestone in the Bigelow Gulch Forker Road construction project. There is still some cosmetic work to be done, but county officials expect that to wrap up by spring of 2023.
Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi just supersized the IRS to get more money to spend. $80 billion, 5 times the current budget of the IRS. 87,000 new recruits, an IRS larger than the Pentagon.
It's that last claim that has generated questions. Viewers like Steve wrote in to ask, an IRS larger than the Pentagon? Is it true? Let's verify. Our sources are the Inflation Reduction Act, the Treasury Department, IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig, and the Department of Defense. Let's start with the ad's claim about an additional $80 billion for the IRS.
$80 billion.
That number comes from the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed earlier this year on party lines. It allocates $80 billion over the next 10 years to fund several IRS functions, including taxpayer services, enforcement, operations, and more.
87,000 new recruits.
So now, what about the claim of 87,000 new recruits? That number comes from a May 2021 report from the Treasury Department, which estimated a funding bill similar to the one that passed, and it would allow the IRS to hire 86,852 employees over the next decade. In a letter to the Senate, the IRS commissioner wrote, "The IRS has fewer frontline experienced examiners in the field than at any time since World War II, and fewer employees than at any time since the 1970s. The letter goes on to add, "These resources are absolutely not about increasing audit scrutiny on small businesses or middle-income Americans."
An IRS larger than the Pentagon.
And finally, what about claims of an IRS larger than the Pentagon? The Pentagon states online it houses approximately 24,000 military and civilian employees and 3,000 non-defense support personnel. While that is fewer people than the IRS plans to hire or currently has on staff, the claim needs context. The Pentagon is one building, which includes a small percentage of people who work for the Department of Defense. Altogether, the DoD employs more than 2.9 million service members and civilians, and it is the largest employer in the United States.
Washington's Public Disclosure Commission website tracks local and state candidate campaign finances. Right now, out of all the Spokane County races, the PDC shows Democratic candidate Maggie Yates raised the most funds with more than $192,000. Yates is running for Spokane County's newly drawn District 5. She's hoping to unseat Republican Al French, who's sat on the board the last 10 years. According to the PDC, French raised the second highest campaign funds at more than $176,000. In the primary election, Yates secured more votes than French, which could be why, even though Yates has raised more than him, French has spent $18,000 more than Yates on his campaign. In fact, most of French's expenditures went to TV ads. The second most funded race in Spokane County is the newly drawn Commission District 1. Republican candidate Kim Please's campaign raised more than $133,000, while her opponent, Democratic candidate Chris Jordan, raised nearly $119,000. On the federal level, Republican incumbent Kathy McMorris Rogers is running for a 10th term, and Democratic candidate Natasha Hill is hoping to unseat her. According to the Federal Election Commission, McMorris Rogers has raised more than $6 million. Her opponent, who is new to the political realm, has raised nearly $342,000. But Washington's U.S. Senate race is one of the most contested this election, and the campaign funds prove it. Democratic incumbent Patty Murray brought in nearly $19 million, and she spent $2 million more than this, while her opponent, Republican Tiffany Smiley, raised more than $16 million and spent nearly $15 million.
This is significant. Local gun safety advocates say this resolution marks the first school board in Washington state to adopt a safe gun storage resolution. In its passing, the board hopes to further educate the district on the importance of proper firearm storage. According to gunresponsibility.org, more than 34% of Washingtonians report owning a gun. And in that 34% is gun safety advocate Petra Hoy.
We're gun owners and it's on us to be responsible.
A simple statement of opinion that isn't reflected in national data. According to Be Smart, a nationwide program that raises awareness around safe gun storage, 4.6 million American children live in households with at least one loaded and unlocked firearm. In the school board's most recently adopted resolution, the board hopes to take Eastern Washington parents out of that statistic.
It's just a matter of responsibility. I think we of course are allowed to have firearms, but just like anything else, handle it properly, keep it out of the hands of children, and we can keep the community as a whole safer.
Hoy says she originally got involved in Moms Demand Action and Be Smart following the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary. Since then, the country has watched other large shootings take place at schools. And even though most of these tragic events are states away, Hoy says she too feels the pain of those affected.
That's our humanity, right? That could have been our children. Like maybe we can't even find Sandy Hook on a map, but as a mother, I think you get that mama bear vibe, right? That it's like, that could be my child, that could be someone I know's child.
Hoy doesn't have children in the district, but she's been a vocal supporter of the board and its historic decisions in promoting safe gun storage.
I'm really proud of the leadership of Spokane Public, that we're the first district in the state to get this done, which is very exciting.
Hoy says following this resolution, she believes the district has opened the door to more district family conversations around overall gun safety and suicide prevention. When the resolution was still in its early stages, we spoke with the owner of Sharpshooting and SPS parent Jeremy Ball. Ball said he would provide free locks to all eligible gun-owning district parents. And if the district is open to it, he says that offer still stands.
Susan Olson and her husband have lived in their home for more than 45 years. Susan says she's learned how to keep her utility bill low by finding ways to keep cold air out.
We insulated the attic, some in the basement.
Now with her children out of the house, Susan says the natural gas price hike won't affect her too much.
Doesn't impact us, but it might have when we first moved here because we've been here 45 years, so we had a young family and more young people are moving in this old neighborhood, so that might impact them. I don't know.
Avista is a primary utility company for Spokane residents. They serve nearly 170,000 customers. Avista says higher gas costs are mainly driven by increases in natural gas market prices. For a typical Spokane homeowner during the winter, Avista says their bill might be 12% more than what they're used to.
Fuel prices are different, but when you look at things, every home is different too. So the way you heat your home and what's more efficient, depending on how your home is set up, is really a personal choice. And there's a lot of ways that you can still conserve energy regardless of what your heating type is.
Avista says there are two easy ways to lower your energy bill. One of them is lowering your thermostat when you leave your house or apartment, and another one is covering any empty space where outside air might come through. A spokesperson from the Spokane Neighborhood Action Partners says people should realize their bills aren't getting any cheaper. The WUTC reevaluates natural gas prices each year.
Conservation education is pretty important. Want to learn how to keep your home as warm as you can, with plastic, with blankets, with adjusting your temperature. There's always some people who aren't happy with it. I mean, none of us like our bills to go up.
And for Susan, she knows she has to be honest about how much her utilities cost when she's ready to sell the house.
We'll be honest with them. I mean, we'll get the bills out and show them maybe.
We've met lifelong friends doing this. You just meet your neighbors and everybody around,
On this street in northwest Spokane, you'll find more pumpkins than people.
And every year they say the same thing. Why do you keep doing it? You know, it's a lot of pumpkins, but you know, it's a great way to bring the community together.
Jorge Alvarez is the owner of what's become known as the Spokane Pumpkin House.
I was a truck driver for a while. We ended up getting pumpkins for free that the company wasn't needing, so I brought them home. We carved them all. We thought it looked cool. Kind of just took off after that, you know.
5 years later, he's keeping the annual tradition alive.
Every year we've just been getting more and more.
This year, 512 pumpkins on the lawn, even the roof.
We get a lot of traffic through here around this time, for sure. Well, the buses sometimes they'll stop and then they let all the people out to take photos and they get back in and they take off.
Jorge does all the gutting.
The first 20, it kind of hurts, but then after that you just, the shoulder goes numb and you just got to rock and roll, you know, that's all you can do.
He invites members of his Facebook group to help with the carving.
Everybody that shows up just has a great imagination. You invite people over to carve and you can see, even in full-grown adults, the kids just come out when they get their hands on a pumpkin and they're surrounded with a bunch of people.
These pumpkins are even more impressive at night, illuminated with more than 500 battery-powered candles.
When the sun goes down, we have a Sasquatch hidden in here somewhere, so we tell everybody, try to find the Squatch, you know.
You might be wondering what happens to all these squashes once their time is up. Turns out, nothing goes to waste.
Normally we make one big pile and we post it online. If anybody wants to come by, a lot of people have farm animals in this area, chickens, goats, horses, they all eat it.
Jorge plans to keep the display up through November 2nd at 4315 West Rowan near the VA hospital.
The KREM family, owners of the Mexican restaurant Maracas and Marisco, celebrate Dia de los Muertos every year. America KREM says it is one of her favorite holidays.
Mexican culture is very special because all the people who die, is the special day today, come back, all the souls.
Dia de los Muertos is the one day she and her family get together to remember and honor relatives who have passed.
The family gets all close together and spends time together, or they talk about memories that we didn't get to live, but our parents did.
So during Dia de los Muertos, people like to wear these masks called calavera. Now these masks are worn to celebrate loved ones that have died. And America hopes she can just spread a little bit of that tradition to people that live here in Spokane.
Maybe people from Spokane know nothing about that. And I think everybody wanna explain to the people how it's important to us.
America and her family are from Paracho, the same town that was portrayed in the movie Coco, which is about the Day of the Dead. Inside their North Spokane restaurant, they have authentic Mexican paintings to demonstrate their Mexican heritage.
Very important for us is a lot of traditions, and if I have a little thing for my culture, made me feel very happy.
America hopes to share that tradition at Maracas and Marisco, where she wants people to feel like they are experiencing Mexico.
When you see the socks.
Honest to God, a couple years ago, I sat in there for about 10 minutes with white socks on and nobody recognized me.
You know who it is.
I take these home and dry a lot of apples.
Kevin Miller knows the process.
We put about 5 or 6 per bag.
He can tie each one without even looking.
That's a decent size for a family of 4.
But make no mistake, he looks at each apple before it goes out the door.
I know how I'd feel if I opened up a bag in there. Moosh.
He takes pride in his volunteer work at Second Harvest and Tom's Turkey Drive because he's needed help too.
Being almost homeless for quite a while and then going in one day and here's, you've got a complete turkey dinner to go home and make.
For more than 22 years, Tom's Turkey Drive has been committed to making sure families in the Inland Northwest have a meal to share.
Hi, how are you?
That commitment will always stay the same, but this year, inflation is causing new challenges for our partners at Second Harvest. Food costs are up about 10%. Not to mention, the price of fuel is driving up costs too.
The farmers who grow the food rely on diesel, so all of those things are kind of conspiring to push food prices up.
Turkeys might be flightless, But the cost of them are soaring. The Department of Agriculture reports prices for an 8 to 16 pound bird are up by 73% from last year. But ongoing inflation is only partially to blame, with the H5N1 strain of the bird flu also responsible for the dramatic price surge. Thankfully, Tom's Turkey Drive and Rosar's ordered turkeys last January, but inflation is making each of the 11,000 boxes we send out that much more expensive.
So $20 covers the cost of a turkey, but not a lot more.
It's why every dollar donated to Tom's Turkey Drive means so much more this year. For Kevin, being known for his fun socks has a deeper meaning.
Hopefully they go away with a smile and a little lighter heart. That's all we can do.
Thank you for joining us here on KREM 2 Plus for a look at some of the biggest news stories of the past week in Spokane and the rest of the Inland Northwest. For the most up-to-date news throughout the weekend, you can watch our very latest newscast right here on KREM 2 Plus. Just look for them in the bottom navigation menu. I'm Tim Pham. Thanks for watching.